I wasn't looking for anything when it happened. Not a guy, not a moment, not some quiet shift in my life that I wouldn't be able to undo later. I was just trying to kill 20 minutes between a client call and a train I hoped I wouldn't miss. The cafe was louder than usual. Steam hissing, dishes clinking, someone laughing too hard near the window. I stepped back without looking, juggling my phone and a paper cup, and ran straight into someone solid. Coffee sloshed. My phone slipped. My stomach dropped. "Hey. Sorry," we both said at the same time. I crouched to grab my phone just as he did. Our fingers brushed, and something about the contact made me look up, instead of away. He was older. Mid-30s, maybe. Calm face, steady eyes. The kind of expression that didn't rush anything. He wore a dark coat that looked well-worn in a good way, like it had been with him through actual life. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah. Phone survived," I said. Emotionally, I'm less sure. That earned a soft smile. Not flashy. Just genuine. "I'm Lucas," he said, standing and offering his hand. "Ethan." The handshake lingered a fraction too long. Not awkward, just noticeable. We ended up standing off to the side, out of the traffic flow, like the collision had quietly claimed us a corner of space. He nodded toward my half-spilled cup. "Let me replace that." "You don't have to." "I want to." I should have said no again. Instead, I watched him order for both of us like it was already decided. When he handed me the fresh cup, our fingers touched again. This time, neither of us commented on it. We talked. About small things. The neighborhood changing too fast. How coffee never tastes the same 2 days in a row. I told him I worked freelance, which felt like confessing something unfinished. He told me he'd moved back to the city recently after being gone a long time. "Does it feel like home again?" I asked. He thought about it. "Not yet, but it feels possible." That answer stayed with me. At some point, I realized my anxiety about the train had disappeared. Time felt softer around him, like it had agreed to slow down. "I should go," I said, even though my body didn't move. "Yeah," he replied, still not stepping back. A pause settled between us. Comfortable. Heavy in a quiet way. "Can I get your number?" he asked, straightforward but careful, like he wasn't assuming anything. My chest tightened, the good kind. "Sure." We swapped phones, standing close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something clean, understated. When he handed my phone back, his thumb brushed my knuckle. Deliberate? Accidental? I couldn't tell. I didn't want to. Outside, the air was cool and sharp. He zipped his coat and looked at me like he was memorizing something small. "I'm glad this happened," he said. "Me too." He walked away first. I stood there longer than necessary, watching his back disappear into the crowd. Only then did I realize my heart was beating harder than it should have been for a stranger. On the train, his name kept looping in my head. The sound of it. The way he'd said mine. I told myself it was just a moment. A nice, unexpected one. But deep down, I already knew. Some meetings don't feel random. They feel like the start of something that's been quietly waiting for you to show up. Lucas texted first. Not immediately. No dramatic, "made it home." Just a simple message the next evening while I was reheating leftovers I barely wanted. "Lucas, hope this isn't weird. I was thinking about yesterday. Want to get a drink sometime?" I stared at the screen longer than necessary. Rereading it, like hidden meaning might reveal itself if I squinted hard enough. My chest felt warm. Steady. Not frantic. That felt important. Me. Yeah. I'd like that. We settled on Thursday. No overthinking. "One drink," he said. I told myself the same thing, even as I stood in front of my closet that night, changing shirts twice before pretending I hadn't. The bar was small and low-lit, the kind of place that didn't try to impress anyone. Lucas was already there when I arrived, seated at the end of the bar, jacket off, sleeves rolled just enough to look intentional. He smiled when he saw me. Not big. Familiar already. "Hey," he said. "Hey." Conversation came easy, which surprised me. Usually first drinks feel like interviews disguised as charm. This didn't. We talked about dumb things at first. The bartender's questionable playlist, the art on the walls. Then quieter things slipped in. He told me about leaving the city in his 20s, about a relationship that had slowly stopped feeling like home. I didn't pry. He didn't overshare. There was a balance to it I appreciated. "I forgot how loud this place can feel," he admitted at one point, glancing around. "When you come back after a while." I nodded. "It's like everyone else stayed in motion while you paused." "Exactly." He looked at me then. Really looked, like he was checking whether I understood. I did. When my glass was empty, I realized I didn't want to rush filling the silence. I wanted to sit in it. Outside, the night air was cool, grounding. We stood on the sidewalk longer than necessary, neither of us stepping away. "I had a good time," he said. "Me too." Another pause. Not awkward. Charged but gentle. He didn't kiss me. Instead, he reached out and brushed his thumb against the side of my hand. A question more than a move. I answered by turning my palm slightly, letting our fingers lace together. It felt steady, right-sized, like something that could grow without being forced. We walked a block like that before parting ways. When I got home, I didn't collapse into overanalysis the way I usually did. I just sat on the edge of my bed, phone in my hand, smiling at nothing. Later, lying in the dark, I replayed small details, the way he listened without interrupting, the way his hand was warm but unassuming in mine. I knew better than to label things too early. But I also knew when something felt different. This didn't feel like a spark meant to burn out fast. It felt like the quiet beginning of something that would ask me to stay present. And for the first time in a long while, I wanted to. We didn't text every day after that. Not because we were playing games, more like neither of us wanted to cheapen what had started to take shape. When Lucas did reach out again, it was a few days later. Late afternoon. "Kimes, I'm cooking tonight. Nothing fancy. Want to come over?" I stared at the message, pulse ticking up in that slow, deliberate way that meant I actually cared. T-hid. His place was across town, quieter than my neighborhood. Older buildings, trees lining the street. The kind of area that felt settled. When he opened the door, he was barefoot, sleeves rolled, faintly flustered in a way that made my chest warm. "Hey," he said, stepping aside. "Hey." The apartment smelled like garlic and something citrusy. Warm. Lived in. There were books stacked in places that suggested they were actually read, not staged. A framed photo on the shelf caught my eye. Lucas, a few years younger, arms slung around someone whose face had been carefully cropped out. He noticed me looking, but didn't comment. I appreciated that. We ate at the small table by the window. He talked while he cooked, narrating mistakes, asking opinions he clearly didn't need. I sat on the counter, legs dangling, feeling oddly at ease. Dinner was good. Simple. Real. We talked about families this time. Mine scattered and noisy, his quieter, complicated. He didn't flinch when I mentioned past relationships. I didn't push when he paused before mentioning his. At one point, he reached across the table without thinking, brushing a crumb off my knuckle with his thumb. The gesture was so casual, it startled me more than if he'd leaned in to kiss me. Afterward, we didn't rush to clean up. We moved to the couch, sitting close enough that our knees touched. A movie played without either of us paying attention. His arm rested along the back cushion, not around me. "Not yet." "You okay?" he asked softly, eyes still on the screen. I nodded. "Yeah, I really am." That seemed to matter to him. I felt it in the way his shoulders eased. When he finally kissed me, it wasn't sudden. He turned slowly, giving me time to meet him halfway. The kiss was unhurried, exploratory, like we were learning the shape of something rather than claiming it. His hand settled at my waist, warm and steady. Mine found his shoulder, then the back of his neck. We broke apart after a few seconds, foreheads touching. "Still okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I breathed. "More than okay." We didn't take it further. Not because we couldn't, but because neither of us needed to. There was something grounding about stopping where we did, about choosing to let this stay intentional. Later, when I stood at his door pulling my jacket on, he watched me with an expression I couldn't quite name. Thoughtful, careful. "I'm glad you came," he said. "Me too." Walking home, the city felt quieter than usual, like it was giving me space to think, not spiral. Just think. I realized then that what I felt wasn't urgency. It wasn't fear of losing momentum. It was trust, forming slowly. And as I crawled into bed that night, the feeling that stayed with me wasn't hunger or anticipation, but a calm certainty that whatever this was, it was being built the right way. Seeing Lucas again stopped feeling like a question. It just became part of my week, the way certain songs do once they slip into rotation without asking permission. We didn't label anything. We didn't need to. There was a quiet agreement in the way we kept choosing each other. This time, he came to my place. I cleaned more than necessary, then laughed at myself for it. My apartment was smaller than his, louder, closer to the street. When he arrived, he took it in without judgment, like he was trying to understand me through the space. "This feels like you," he said, glancing around. "Because it's slightly chaotic? Because it's lived in." That landed deeper than I expected. We ordered takeout and ate on the floor because my table was buried under half-finished projects. At some point, his shoulder leaned into mine, casual and warm. I didn't move away. Neither did he. Conversation drifted. Childhood stories. Bad habits. He admitted he took too long to trust people. I admitted I sometimes pretended not to want things I actually wanted badly. He nodded at that, like he understood from experience. Later, music played softly from my phone. Not background noise. Something he recognized. "I haven't heard this in years," he said. "You look like someone who holds onto old playlists." I teased. He smiled. "Only the ones that remind me who I was." We sat there, legs stretched out, his hand resting palm down between us. It felt intentional without being heavy. When we kissed this time, it was different. Not more intense, just more sure. His hand slid to my lower back, guiding me closer. I felt the quiet strength in it, the steadiness. We pulled apart slowly, breathing each other in. "I don't feel rushed with you," he said, forehead resting against mine. "Me neither." We stayed like that for a while, not moving, not escalating, just present. Eventually, he stood to leave, slipping his jacket on. At the door, he hesitated. "I'm glad we're doing this the way we are," he said. I nodded. "Yeah, me too." After he left, the apartment felt different. Not emptier, just changed. Like something had been rearranged without being displaced. I lay in bed later, staring at the ceiling, realizing how rare it was to feel both grounded and open at the same time. No spiraling, no second guessing, just the sense that I was letting someone see me slowly and being seen back at the same pace. And for now, that was more than enough. What surprised me most wasn't how often we started seeing each other. It was how naturally my life began to rearrange itself around him, not in a consuming way. More like making room without realizing you were clearing space. Lucas started texting in the morning sometimes, nothing heavy, just observations. Times, the bakery on 8th reopened. Or, "It's colder today. Wear the jacket." I'd catch myself smiling at my phone on the train, then immediately feel ridiculous for it. One Sunday, he suggested a walk. No destination, just movement. We met near the river, gray sky hanging low like it might decide to rain at any second. He wore a beanie I hadn't seen before, pulled low, hands tucked into his coat pockets. "You look tired," he said gently. "Productive tired," I replied. "Which is just regular tired with better PR." He laughed, that quiet, contained laugh that always felt like a small reward. We walked without hurry, steps falling into an easy rhythm. The city felt muted that day, like it was giving us privacy. At one point, he bumped his shoulder lightly into mine, testing. I leaned back without thinking. We stopped at a lookout where the river bent, water dull and steady below us. He rested his elbows on the railing, staring out. "I don't usually do this," he said after a while. "Walks?" I asked, letting something start again. I waited. He always seemed to appreciate that. "When I moved back," he continued, "I told myself I'd keep things simple. No expectations. No emotional investments I wasn't sure about." "And now?" I asked. He turned his head, meeting my eyes. "Now I'm realizing that being careful isn't the same as being closed." That settled somewhere deep in my chest. "I'm not great at pretending I don't care," I admitted. "I just get quiet instead." He nodded slowly. "I've noticed." There was no accusation in it, just recognition. As we headed back, the air finally gave in and started to drizzle. Light rain. The kind that feels more like a suggestion than weather. Lucas reached out without looking, lightly catching my sleeve to keep me close as we hurried under an awning. The gesture was instinctive, protective. It made my breath catch. We stood there, rain tapping around us, his hand still resting at my side like it belonged there. "I don't need this to be fast," he said quietly, "but I do need it to be honest." I nodded. "I can do honest." He leaned in, pressing his forehead to mine. Not a kiss, not yet. Just contact. Just agreement. When we finally parted, it felt less like saying goodbye and more like pausing something we both intended to return to. That night, lying in bed, I realized I wasn't bracing myself for disappointment the way I usually did. I wasn't rehearsing exits or contingency plans. I was just here, in it, letting something unfold without trying to outrun it or pin it down. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like trust, not just in him, but in myself. The first real test came quietly, not with drama or raised voices, but with distance. Lucas got busy. I could feel it before he said anything. Responses stretching longer, plans shifting instead of settling. Nothing alarming, just life pressing in the way it always does. Old habits in me started whispering anyway. I didn't say anything at first. I've always been good at convincing myself I don't need reassurance. I just adjust, shrink expectations, pretend I'm fine. But one evening, after a long day where everything felt slightly misaligned, I texted him before I could overthink it. "Hey, can we talk later?" He called 10 minutes later. "Hey," he said, voice warm but cautious. "What's up?" I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor. "I don't want this to sound heavier than it is," I began, already hating how that sounded. When things go quiet, my brain fills in the gaps. I'm working on that. I just wanted you to know." There was a pause. Not the bad kind, the thoughtful kind. "I'm glad you told me," he said. "I've been distracted, yeah. But not from you." Something in my chest loosened. "I don't want to disappear when things get busy," he added. "I just forget to narrate sometimes." "I can live with that," I said, "as long as I know where I stand." "You stand here," he replied, gentle but certain. We met 2 days later at his place. No big greeting, just a long look before he pulled me into a hug that felt grounding, like it was meant to anchor both of us. "I'm not great at pacing myself," he admitted as we sat on the couch. "I go quiet instead of asking for space. It's not fair." "I don't need constant," I said. "I just need honest." He nodded. Then we're on the same page. We didn't dissect it further. We didn't need to. Instead, we cooked together. Me chopping badly, him pretending not to notice. At one point, he reached around me to grab the salt, his chest brushing my back, his hand resting briefly at my waist. It felt domestic in a way that startled me. Easy. Unforced. Later, we lay on the couch, legs tangled, talking about nothing important. He traced idle patterns on my arm, absent-minded, comfortable. "I'm not used to this part," he murmured. "Which part?" "Letting someone see me while things are still forming." I turned slightly to look at him. "You're doing okay." He smiled, soft and a little relieved. When it was time for me to leave, he walked me to the door like always. This time, he didn't hesitate. "I'm in this," he said simply. "I just move slower sometimes." I nodded. "I can walk at your pace, as long as we're walking together." He kissed me then. Steady, familiar, not searching for proof, just presence. On the way home, I realized something had shifted again. Not forward, exactly. Deeper. I wasn't waiting for him to disappear anymore. I wasn't bracing for the moment things would thin out and fade. I was learning how to stay open without losing myself, how to speak instead of retreating, how to let someone meet me there. And as the city lights slid past the train window, I felt it settle in. Not excitement, not fear, but a calm readiness. Whatever came next, I wasn't walking into it alone. There's a point where something stops feeling new and starts feeling real. Not because it's dramatic, but because it settles. That's where we landed, without ever announcing it. Lucas started leaving things at my place. Not intentionally at first, just small practical things. A charger, a book he said he'd finish later. Then one morning, I realized his toothbrush had been in my bathroom for a week, without either of us commenting on it. That realization hit harder than any big confession would have. We were lying in bed that morning, sunlight cutting across the sheets, the city already awake outside. He was propped on one elbow, scrolling through his phone, bare chest warm against my side. "You thinking about something?" he asked without looking up. "Yeah," I admitted. "I'm trying not to overthink it." He glanced at me then, phone forgotten. "Say it anyway." I took a breath. This feels solid, and that scares me a little. He smiled, not amused. Understanding. Good. It scares me too. The next few weeks were full in a quiet way. Dinners that turned into late conversations. Grocery shopping like it meant something. Running errands together and pretending it didn't matter that it did. One night, after too much wine and not enough planning, we ended up talking about the future. Not the distant, abstract kind, the practical one. "I don't know if I want to stay in the city forever," he said, rinsing dishes beside me. "But I know I don't want to run anymore." I dried a plate, hands steady. "I don't need everything mapped out. I just need to know when I'm included." He turned the water off and faced me fully. "You are." The certainty in his voice was quiet but unmistakable. Later, curled up on the couch, his arm heavy around me, I realized how different this felt from things I'd had before. There was no urgency to lock it down, no fear it would vanish if I didn't hold on tight enough. It was there because we were choosing it. Again and again. The night before he left for a short work trip, we stood in my kitchen, half-packed bag by the door. I felt the old reflex rise. Brace. Pull back. Prepare for absence. Instead, I stepped into him. "I'll miss you," I said simply. He kissed my forehead, lingering. "I'll miss you too." No promises layered on top, no anxiety tucked into the goodbye, just truth. After he left, the apartment felt quiet but not hollow. That felt like progress. Trust, maybe, or proof. I lay in bed later, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how far I'd come, not just with him, but with myself. How I'd learned to speak instead of shrink, to stay instead of disappear. And as sleep finally pulled me under, one thought settled in clearly, calmly. Whatever love looks like from here on out, I know how I want it to feel. Steady, chosen, and shared. Lucas came back on a Thursday night. I knew because I'd been checking the time more than necessary, pretending it was about deadlines and not the fact that my body seemed to know before my brain did. When my phone buzzed, landing now, something in me relaxed all at once. He showed up an hour later, jacket slung over one shoulder, travel worn but smiling the second I opened the door. I didn't say anything. I just stepped into him. He dropped the jacket without protest and wrapped his arms around me like that was exactly where he'd meant to be. "Hey," he murmured into my hair. Hey! We stayed like that longer than usual. Not because we'd missed each other desperately, but because neither of us felt the need to rush past the reunion. When we finally pulled back, he looked at me for a second like he was checking that something still fit. It did. We ordered food we barely tasted and sat on the couch with our legs tangled, his hand resting on my knee like an anchor. He told me about the trip. Work stuff, boring stuff, and I listened, realizing how good it felt to hear his voice in the same room again. Later, lying in bed, the city quiet around us, he turned onto his side to face me. You ever notice, he said, how you stop imagining the worst when something actually feels right? I smiled faintly. Yeah, it's unsettling at first. He traced a line along my arm, thoughtful. I don't want to jinx this by overdefining it, but I also don't want to pretend it's nothing. I met his eyes. Then don't pretend. There it was. Not a declaration. Not a promise with sharp edges. Just a shared understanding, settling into place. We kissed slowly, familiar now, like a language we'd learned together. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine, breathing steady. I'm not going anywhere, he said. I believed him. Not because of the words, but because of the way he said them. Like he was stating a fact, not asking for reassurance. Morning came gently. Light filtered in, pale and quiet. We lay there awake, not touching for once, just sharing the space. I used to think love was supposed to feel urgent, I said after a while. Like if you didn't grab it fast enough, it would disappear. And now? He asked. Now it feels more like choosing, I said. Over and over. He smiled, eyes soft. That sounds right. We eventually got up, made coffee, moved around each other without thinking about it. At one point, I caught our reflections in the kitchen window. Nothing remarkable, just two men existing in the same frame. But the simplicity of it hit me harder than anything dramatic ever had. Later, after he left for work and I sat alone in the quiet apartment, I realized something important. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for the other shoe to drop, not for him to pull away, not for myself to panic and retreat. I was here, in something steady, something chosen. And whatever came next, whatever shape this took, I knew I was finally meeting it with open hands instead of clenched fists. That felt like love. Not loud, not perfect, just real.